Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 5 of our reading of Pandora's Genes. And so, yeah. Let me just switch hands here. Anyways, this is a book that is by Kathryn Lance, and this is a trilogy, and this is the first book of said trilogy. And I still have to look up what the other 2 books in the trilogy are, but I'm sure they are still for sale along with this book. This is an original copy from 1985. And, well, speaking of that, we're going to go over the copyright information. It says copyright 1985 by Kathryn Lance. First printing. But yeah. Anyways, in the last episode, Zach decided to fake his death. He basically ransacked the campsite that he and Evie were using, and to head back to his own home, or a place where he grew up. But he was waylaid by some people on the other side of a wooden bridge. They demanded a toll, and now they want to take Evie away. And he's trying to convince them not to do that. And we are going to see how that turns out. Okay. Bookmark away. Okay, there we go. Don't be too sure, said Zach. A contingent of the principal's men are riding a few hours behind us. The brothers again exchanged glances. I see no reason to believe you, or not to believe you, stranger, the small man said. Then let us go. I don't see how we can do that now, especially if what you tell us is true. If anything happens to me, the principal himself will track you down and punish you, even if he has to spend the rest of his life doing it, Zach spoke with conviction. This, at least, was the truth. Perhaps, said the little man, but that doesn't change anything. You see, he went on, my brother and I have been lonely. A few months ago, our wife ran off with the traders. We've been looking for another, but unattached women ain't so easy to find. And then you came along with this girl, and it seems like a Dina-sent gift, if you see what I mean. Zach felt sick. After everything that had happened, his decision to betray the principal, his promises to Evie, he could not allow her to be taken by 2 such men. But lonely as we are, the man continued, now that we've taken a closer look at you and the girl, other possibilities come to mind. A girl like this would be worth a lot of money to somebody. My daughter is not for sale, said Zach. The man looked closely at Evie, then at Zach. She is very beautiful, he said, but I don't need to tell you that. I also don't have to tell you that she doesn't look anything like you. I don't believe you're her father. He's my second father, Evie said quickly. Then why do you look at him that way? That ain't the kind of look a girl gives to anyone but her lover. Zach tensed, but there was nothing he could do or say. Where did you steal her from? Ermil, said the taller brother, sounding nervous. Let's get on with it. Don't worry, said Ermil. Look at his face. He's lost, and he knows it. And what about the seal ring? Most likely he stole that too, or the little man stopped talking and thought for a moment. Maybe you didn't steal her at that, he said to Zach. If your seal ring is genuine and you're on business to the principal, well, we've heard things about the principal, and I think I know what your business is. He waited a moment, but Zach didn't speak, so he went on. You're far from the capital, my friend, farther, I think, than you are supposed to be. You are one of the principal's procurers, but when you saw the girl, you decided to take her for yourself, is that right? Zach felt dizzy. The little man was very clever, and he could not think of a way of answering without letting Evie know more than he wanted her to know. You need an answer, said Ermil. Your silence tells me everything I want to know. He paced a few steps, then stopped and approached Zach. Zach hoped for an opening, but the big man, Oren, still held his crossbow trained on him, while Ermil's hand continued to touch lightly the throwing knife at his waist. The little man was looking at him with intensity, and Zach knew that anything he said or did might make matters worse. He waited. If I'm right, Ermil said after a moment, and I see that I am, you are in a great deal of trouble. You can't go back to the principal no matter what we do. You mentioned the penalties for girl stealing. I imagine the penalties for one of the principal's own men, one who took a girl intended for the principal himself, would be much worse, perhaps flogging and castration before a slow death in the machines. He waited, then went on, no matter, if, as you say, the principal's men are behind you, I know you'll want to be here when they arrive, and far from arresting us for the minor matter of collecting tolls. They will no doubt reward us for turning over to them a criminal like you. And the girl, yes. Not for the first time, Zach wished he were quick and clever at lying. Everything the little man had said was true except for the fact of the principal's men being on the road. At last he spoke. That's a very good story, but unfortunately for you, none of it's true. The fact is that I am a delegate of the principal, on an important mission, and Evie is my daughter. I'll say one thing for you, stranger, you don't give up. Ermil seemed relaxed, very sure of himself. Still, my brother and I are not criminals. We may not be the principal's most loyal subjects, but we do believe in law, up to a point. I offer you a chance. Well, said Zach, knowing he should not have spoken, it is this. We will let you go on your way. As you know, you ain't far from the western border. In return, you will leave us the girl. If you're as clever as you must be, you will have covered your trail long before this, so there's little danger to us. We can make good use of the metal we'll get for this girl after we make some use of her ourselves. I imagine the principal will pay a great deal to get her back. Again, Zach had to control his anger. He took a deep breath and was about to speak, but Ermil went on. I ain't saying you have to like it, he said, but you don't have much choice. Oren, who was still silent through the exchange, spoke now. Why don't we just kill him, Ermil? What if... No, said Ermil. Not unless we have to. He is not what he claims to be. I'm sure of that. I'm beginning to lose patience, stranger. Zach, Evie gripped his cloak. Hush, he said. Let me think. It had all happened so quickly. He wasn't sure what to do. Of course, he must fight the men, or he'd have to wait for an opportunity. The important thing was to give Evie a chance to get away. As for the outcome of the fight, Zach had few illusions. He had never been outstanding with weapons, always relying more on his size and wits than his reflexes. Still, he had this on his side. Ermil seemed reluctant to kill him outright. Oren was the more unsure one, but he seemed stupid, and Zach had observed that he moved awkwardly. Well, said Ermil. Zach let his shoulders sag. All right, he said. I accept your terms. As you pointed out, I don't have much of a choice. Evie drew a breath in sharply, but said nothing. Ermil was pleased. Good, he said. My brother will escort you as far as the border on your mount. Then he will leave you there. Of course, we'll keep the mount and your weapons. If you get any ideas about coming back for the girl, we'll be long gone by then. Zach nodded. Once again, as when he had crossed the river 3 days ago, he felt relieved. The decision had been made. He knew what he must do. One thing, said Zach. Let me have a few moments alone with the girl. Ermil raised his eyebrows, and Zach added quickly, just a few words. We've been together a long time. Don't trust them, said Oren. What can they do? Said Ermil with a shrug. He's unarmed, and she's a girl. I don't see the harm. He turned to Zach. My brother and I will be standing right here just in case you decide to try anything. And don't think we can't stop you, said Oren. You see the cap Ermil's wearing? He took it from a fox cat that he stopped with his knife. Zach was impressed. Fox cats' reflexes were such that they were said to be able to catch birds taking wing. I only want to say goodbye, said Zach. Ermil and Oren moved a few paces away. Zach squatted in the shade of a tree. His legs were shaking from tension. Evie sat beside him. He didn't know where to begin, and she surprised him by speaking first. Is it true what they said about the principal? About what the principal would do if he caught you? If he caught me, said Zach. Evie, you don't have any choice, I can see that. Be quiet, he said. We don't have much time. He spoke, urgently, keeping his voice as low as possible. A glance showed him that the brothers were watching closely. Oren plainly distrustful. Evie was crying now, and he put his arm around her and awkwardly stroked her shoulder as she had done that first night when she'd had a bad dream. After a moment, she calmed and she took a hold. And he took her chin in his hand, turning her face towards his. Do you remember that? Remember what I promised you? I won't let anything happen to you? As long as you're with me, Evie said. I won't break that promise. I have a plan, but I need your help. What do you want me to do? When it comes time for me to go, I'm going to create trouble. I can't be exactly sure how or when, so I want you to promise me something. Hurry it up, you two, said Ermel. It's time to start for the border so Oren can return by dark. After another moment, said Zach. As soon as both men are busy with me, I want you to run into the woods. Then you must go back in the direction of the lake and follow it north until you come to the garden. It shouldn't take you more than a few hours to get there. But you don't have a weapon. He shook his head and went on quickly. Even if you don't get there tonight, you know how to live outdoors, and you have the flint and steel. I know you can do it. But promise me, Evie. Promise you'll do that. About you, I'll try to catch up to you. If I can't, I'll meet you later at the garden. That's not what I meant. What if... She stopped. Zach understood her. I'll be all right. I fought before. Promise me you'll go there and not look back. If you are so sure you'll be all right, why do you want me to run away? She sounded angry. Come on, that's enough, said Emerald. Zach sighed. I can't fight them if I have to worry about protecting you. It's the only chance I have. She was silent a moment. Do you promise you'll come there? If I'm able, I'll come. If not, at least you'll be safe. You said you wouldn't leave me until I was safe and happy. I could never be happy without you. She looked at the ground, and he watched as she twirled the bracelet he had made her round and round her wrist. After a moment, she looked at him. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes as clouded as the stormy sky. Zach thought that she had never looked so beautiful. I'll do it, she said. Zach turned his body so that Ermel could not see his hands. He removed the seal ring and pressed it into Evie's palm. Show them this when you get there, he said. Tell them I sent you. She nodded and put her arms around him and squeezed tightly. Be careful, she said. Zach returned the hug and stood. I'm ready, he said. Chapter 7. Zach was on his mount, Oren behind him. Ermel, now holding the sword, was directing Oren and tying Zach's hands to the mount's lead. The big man was awkward, and Zach sensed afraid of the mount. He must make his move soon, and as Oren struggled with the leather thongs, he saw his chance. Shifting his weight, he suddenly lunged back into Oren. The mount reared, and the two of them slid off. Watch out, shouted Ermel, but it was too late. The men were on the ground, and while Oren rolled frantically to get away from the mount's kicking feet, Zach rolled with him. Ermel had jumped away from the enraged animal, and now Zach threw his arms around Oren's neck from behind. Slowly he stood, pulling the big man up with him. Oren's hands had gone to Zach's left forearm, and with his right hand, Zach reached for Oren's knife and jabbed the point of it against the man's lower back. All this took a very few seconds. Ermel had recovered and was moving towards them. Drop that sword or your brother dies, said Zach. Ermel looked disbelieving and dropped the sword. I should have killed you, he said. It would have been safer, Zach agreed. Now drop the knife and move over by the tree. Now. he added, jabbing the knife point into Oren. Oren let out a yelp. "I'm sorry, Ermil," he said. "That Dina-cursed animal." "Shut up," said Ermil. Zach took a moment to catch his breath. There was no sign of Evie in the clearing. Thank the Dinas, she had escaped. He would stall to give her a few minutes more, then try to get away himself. I underestimated you badly," said Ermil, "but I think you underestimated us. You'll never get away." "That remains to be seen," said Zach. He was working on a plan, but he was in no hurry. The more lead time Evie had, the better. For what seemed a very long time, the three men stood. Zach with his forearm all but choking Oren, the knife poised above the big man's right kidney, while Ermil watched warily from a few feet away. Zach felt sweat dripping down his neck and imagined he could hear the other man's thoughts, though the only sound was of breathing. Then there was rustling in the brush behind him, and he saw Ermil's face change. Zach felt his stomach drop. He did not turn. "Evie, you promised me you'd run." "I did what you told me," she said. "But when I saw what happened, I thought I could help you." "You didn't do what you promised," he shouted. He was so angry that Oren grunted and began to struggle as his breath was cut off. Zach relaxed his hold on Oren, then considered. "You promised you'd go to the garden and not turn back." "But a promise is a promise. I thought you were grown up enough to understand that. I only wanted to help." "Your childish nonsense is likely to get us both killed," he said. "Now do what I told you and get out of here." He heard her intake of breath, but she didn't say anything. And a moment later, the sound of running footsteps told him she had gone into the woods. He hoped that she would do as she was told this time, but knew that he would not be able to maintain the standoff much longer. He would now have to try to disable the brothers in some way. "Your daughter ain't too obedient, is she?" said Ermil. Zach didn't answer. The safest thing would be to kill both men if he could manage it, but like Ermil, he had no taste for cold-blooded murder. In any case, he could no longer continue to hold and struggle the struggling Oren. The man was nearly as big as he was, and Zach's arms were beginning to quiver from fatigue. Slowly he backed up from where his sword lay on the ground, and still covering Oren with the knife, he picked it up, then stepped back. "At least this gives him a bit of mobility." "You can't stop both of us if we decide to rush you," said Ermil. "I can kill at least one, though, and I don't think you want that." Ermil shrugged, and Zach turned to Oren. "Oren, take those thongs and tie your brother to the tree." "What if I don't want to?" said Oren. Then I'll run you through," said Zach. "And don't think I won't." With every minute, the brothers were gaining confidence, and Zach knew that his time was running out. If Evie had obeyed him in the first place, he would now be able to break for his mount and try to get away. Oren was moving very slowly. Zach tried to prod him with the sword, then too late saw Ermil move. The man's aim was deadly, but before he could fend it off, a rock struck Zach just behind the ear, and he staggered. Oren lunged and knocked him to the ground. The sword fell from his hand. In the other hand, he still held the knife, but Oren's fingers closed on his wrist. The man was strong, and Zach had to relax his grip or have his wrist broken. Oren reached for the sword and stood holding the tip against Zach's throat. "I've got him, Ermil," he said. "Go after the girl," said Ermil. "On the mount, I'll take care of our friend here." "That mount don't like me," said Oren. "Take the thongs and beat it then," said Ermil. "Stop wasting time." Ermil took the sword from Oren. Zach tried to raise himself on one elbow and was hit by a wave of dizziness. Feeling helpless, he watched as the big man cautiously approached the mount. She whistled menacingly, but Zach could see she was tired and confused, and after a bit of movement of skittish dancing, she let him climb on. Oren disappeared into the woods. Zach knew it was over. Even if she had obeyed him this time, Evie had no chance of outrunning a mounted man. Once again, "Things have turned," said Ermil. "You're far too dangerous, my friend. You understand? I'll have to kill you now." The little man had both sword and knife, and it was quite clear now now that he knew how to use them. Zach's only hope was to break and run, but he knew that with Ermil's ability to throw, he would not get far. There is nothing personal in this, Ermil went on. I have an idea the principal lost a good man when you decided to take the girl. But your time has run on. Still, the man didn't move, and Zach sensed he was struggling with his reluctance to kill in cold blood. Perhaps he might yet manage to outwit him. If you let me go, said Zach, I will reward you. No, said Ermil, almost sadly. I can't trust you. He was standing above Zach, the sword poised. He pulled it up ready to thrust, and Zach did the only thing he could. He rolled to the side into the little man's legs. Emerald's own hesitation was his undoing. Zach had caught him by surprise, and he fell. Zach threw himself onto Emerald, grabbed for the sword arm, and twisted it. Ermil struggled, but Zach was much larger and stronger. He had quickly retrieved the sword. Now things had once again turned, and Zach forced himself to do what he must. He pulled his arm back, hesitating only a moment, then thrust the blade into Ermil's belly. Ermil grunted, and his hands went to the wound. He looked up at Zach, his eyes startled and slipping out of focus. I'm sorry, said Zach. He pulled the sword out and wiped it on the grass. He felt sick and unclean, and had to breathe deeply several times to clear his head. He told himself that this had been necessary for Evie's safety. Now he must find her before Orin did, and take her to the garden. That was all that mattered. He put the sword into his belt and stood unsteadily. Ermil was breathing in shallow gasps, his eyes staring at nothing. Zach turned and walked across the clearing to where the red dirt road disappeared into the trees. He had nearly reached it when he heard a noise behind him. He turned and was stunned to see Ermil propped on one elbow, incredibly still alive. He had forgotten about the knife, and by the time he realized what had happened, it was too late. Ermil threw before he could move. He felt the knife slip into his chest like a diver into water, and knew that he was a dead man. He did not fall at once. In slow motion, as if under water, he turned and walked towards the woods. Behind him, he thought he heard Ermil laugh. He felt a deep and overpowering anger, not at Ermil, who had killed him, but at himself. Every promise he had made had now been broken, and for nothing. All his life he had considered himself a man of honor, but now he knew that honor was as fragile as the shell of an egg. Whole. It would support a man throughout his life as an egg protects a baby chick, but once a crack appeared, however small, the life inside an egg was doomed. Further cracks would radiate from the first and inevitability as one act of dishonor followed another. In both cases, the end was the same: contamination and death. His anger appeared from a white-hot point where the knife had gone into him and moved to his limbs, making them heavy. He could no longer stand and fell to his knees, even as his legs gave way, and he began to cough and spit up blood. He continued to crawl towards the woods where Evie had gone. He was still trying to follow her when his body stopped moving, and he felt the life draining away into the soft, mossy ground. Part 2. The Principle. Chapter 1. Evie woke cold and stiff. Damp leaves pressed into her face and hair. She was huddled into a hollow at the base of an oak tree. The faint light of early dawn shone through pink and gray clouds, and a gentle drizzle was falling. She pulled her sodden cloak tightly about herself and slowly sat up. Automatically, she looked around for Zach and remembered all that had happened yesterday, how she had disobeyed Zach, his anger, and her own headlong flight into the woods. Long after dark, she had fallen exhausted at the base of a tree where she now lay. It had been too late to build a fire, and in any case, she no longer had Zach's flint. She had lost it, one of the many times she had fallen in her despair and panic. Frantically, she had searched her pockets for the seal the seal ring and had fallen asleep. Just a sec. Seal ring, and had fallen asleep with it clutched tightly in her hand. She opened her palm and looked at it, wondering what to do. It was too late to go back and try to help Zach now, and she wouldn't want to risk disappointing him again. She thought of simply waiting here for him to find her, but she was cold and hungry, and besides, the rain must by now have obscured any signs of her passage. Above her and around as far as she could see were thick leafy branches and wildly growing stalks. She would never find her way out of here. She would starve or be eaten by a wild animal. Each wet rustling of the leaves might be a foxcat preparing to spring. Her teeth began to chatter, and she squeezed her eyes tightly shut, wanting to cry and to call out for her mother or for Zach. But her mother had sold her, and Zach wasn't here. "You're acting like a child." She opened her eyes wide. Zach's words of yesterday echoed inside her head, and she realized she had spoken them aloud to herself. The menacing leaves were once again just forest where she had been for weeks. She would do what she must to prove to Zach that her childishness was in the past. She took a deep breath and stretched, trying to work out the stiffness of sleeping in the damp. She brushed leaves from her hair and straightened it with her fingers. She would follow Zach's instructions and meet him in the place he had talked about, the garden. A little flame of fear that he might not have escaped from the highwayman licked at the edges of her mind. She shook her head. Zach was strong and good. He could not have been overcome by two such evil men. He was probably at the garden already, waiting for her. But where was it? She had become hopelessly turned around. Yesterday, he had told her to find the lake and follow it to the north, but she had no idea where it was from here, or even which direction she had come from. She felt that she must be east of the bridge, where they had met the highwayman, in which case the lake must lie even further east, but the clouds obscured the sun. She looked through the dark canopy of leaves and finally decided that it was a little lighter in one direction. Very well. She would follow the light. She stood and shook out her cloak, preparing for the walk, and then she heard the rhythmic footsteps and faint whistling of the hard-ridden mount. It was Zach. Somehow he had tracked her. Her heart began to beat so rapidly she felt dizzy, and she turned to greet the approaching rider. After a moment, Zach's mount broke past the bushes, and she cried out to the hooded figure riding it, "Zach!" Well, this isn't going to go well, but we're going to have to stop it right there. We've been reading from Pandora's Genes. It is a book by Kathryn Lance. I'm sure this book is still for sale, and I don't know exactly how many printings it's been. This is the first printing, but pretty good. It's been a really good book so far. I'm kind of confused by what happened at the end of the last chapter, but we will see how that turns out. But anyways, if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.